Hello everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to the fourth of our daily webinars for Invasive Species Week. I'm Lucy Cornwell from the GB Non-Native Species Secretariat, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by Katharina Denham-Schmitz from Coventry University. So before I hand over to Katharina for our talk, there's just a quick few housekeeping things to go through. So we're recording the webinar today, just to make you aware. We will save questions as well for the end of the talk. So if you have anything that you want to ask that you think of while the talk's happening, if you can write that in the chat box or in the Q&A, then we'll go through those at the end. And if you have any technical issues, you can write those in the chat too, and I'll try and help where I can. If in doubt, it's normally easiest to leave the meeting and try and rejoin. That normally sorts things out. But there will be a recording available afterwards if for some reason you can't get it to work. Yes, that's everything from me, so I will hand over to Katharina.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Thank you very much for also giving me the opportunity, and thank you for everyone joining today to listen to my presentation. So I will focus first a little to give a little bit of background on non-native plants in the British flora, and then move on to explain how and how citizen science can contribute and is already contributing to prevent future spread of invasive non-native plants. So yeah, I'm Katharina Denham-Schmitz, and just to introduce myself, and I'm an associate professor in plant ecology at Coventry University. Yeah, to just give you a little bit of background, non-native plants in the British flora now outnumber the native species. So we have about 1,500 native species, but more than 2,000 non-native species recorded. And over the last 50 years, you can see on this graph here on the right, that the native species have more than 50% of them have decreased in their distribution, whereas the non-native species have increased quite a lot in that time frame. And maybe also to explain here, there's often for non-native plants, we often distinguish species that have been introduced before 1500 as ancient introductions. So this is quite a small group of about 150 species that have been introduced often with Neolithic farmers or the Romans, or these sort of pathways. Whereas the modern introductions are the ones we are mainly talking about when we talk about non-native species and invasive species in Britain, and they have all been introduced after 1500. So if you look at this number of 2,000 non-natives, then it's pretty obvious that most of them have been actually introduced as ornamentals, more than 50%. And even worse, if you look at the ones that are considered as invasive, that 55 of these 57 species are horticultural introductions. And also, just to make a very important point here, we are not saying in any way that most of these non-native plants are actually not a problem. Even though they have increased in their distribution, they are often very confined to small, and you don't find them everywhere. So it's not that they outnumber the native species in terms of number, but not in terms of distribution. And only the ones that are classified as invasive, these are the ones that have negative impacts, and these are the ones we want to prevent spreading in the future, or to have more of these. So what can we do about this? Some plants are already banned from sale, and you are not allowed to if you have them in the garden there, you have to prevent them spreading outside. And you can see the full list of these species, or this includes all these very well-known invaders, Rhododendron ponticum, Japanese knotweed, giant rhubarb, and here's this yellow plant, the American skunk cabbage. You can see the full list also is available on the Non-Native Species Secretariat's webpage. And these species get listed following a risk assessment. So it's not just that we say, oh, this is invasive, let's list it. So they get to a full risk assessment, which is quite a complex and long process. It requires looking at evidence, published evidence on their impacts, how they spread, looking at the climate suitability and things like that. So this is why it is also a problem that we have so many ornamental plants in the UK. You can see here, so we have the Plant Finder publication, which is now published every year by the Royal Horticultural Society. And starting in 1987, I think they had about 22,000 plants listed. There was a sort of peak maybe in 2020 where the plant finder listed 81,000 plants, and now we are at 64,000. So maybe if you don't know the plant finder, just to explain, so this is a list of all the plants you can buy from nurseries in that year in Britain. So it's just the name of the species and then the nurseries where you can go and buy it. It's also available online. I mean, of course, it's also important to emphasize these are plants, and it includes, the number includes cultivars. We think that about 30,000 of these are species. But then even if it's less, it outnumbers quite a lot the number of native species in Britain. Also, we have to keep in mind that there are often very long time lags from when a plant is first introduced in a garden and until we find it outside. So this is basically, in these plant finders, we also will find our future invaders, which will be a problem maybe in 100 years. And you can compare this to the number of risk assessments which have been done for Britain. And this is like just 48. So this tells you that it is basically impossible to get all these plants risk assessed. And that's why we need a different procedure or different or more early warning signs to just pick the ones where we think they might have the potential, and then we can do risk assessments for them. Yeah, just to continue a little bit with the background. So if you look at an invasion process, and then on the x-axis down here, we have the time frame. You can see that species are introduced and then they spread and go on and can have big impacts the more the distribution increases. And then it gets also very costly to manage them. So maybe for the example of Rhododendron ponticum, which is one of these species there, from the introduction of the species at the end of the 18th century, so they only started to notice it escaping from gardens 100 years later, and that it was a problem for native biodiversity was only recognized in the middle of the 20th century. And now it's basically for these species that are so far spread, you can't really eradicate them anymore. So the only option is to basically manage them in places where you can't do anything, but you just want, this is really crucial to keep them out. Then they are further, a bit earlier on this curve is where species just start to spread. So we could call this the emerging phase. We have species like, for example, pampas grass or the tree of heaven, ailanthus. So these are species that have only recently started to spread in Britain, and for these species, there's still a chance maybe to contain them in that range where they are currently and to prevent them spreading any further. But also, we think for these, eradication is already no longer possible unless you would really throw lots of money at this. But then earlier on in the invasion curve, when species have just been introduced, so on the left side here, we have species that have, there's still a chance. And there's also, so we know, like the pitcher plant, for example, there are currently efforts underway, and also for water primrose to eradicate them. And because these are only small numbers of localized populations, there's still a chance to achieve that. So, but then where does the citizen science come in? So citizen science for the prevention of invasions is focused on this early spread area. So for the prevention, when the species is absent, basically this is a policy issue mainly to have laws that prevent introduction of these species. But once they are here, there are basically two sorts of citizen science we can use to try and identify these species. So we have non-targeted citizen science projects, and you might be familiar with iNaturalist or iRecord, and also the recording schemes of the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland. So these are recordings where people just go out and record basically in maybe just a bioblitz in a particular area, or they, just by chance, they see something and record it. And So this is very useful to pick up early records and the spread of species. But then we have also a targeted citizen science. And here's where the project Plant Alert comes in, which is specifically focused on gardens, basically. Because this is, and I will tell you a little bit more about that, but first I want to talk about the non-targeted citizen science projects. So one of them is iNaturalist. So this is, I think it's probably the most used nature recording app in the UK, if not globally. So you can see here that they have collected more than 10 million records in the UK. And interestingly, the most observed species is actually an invasive species, is a harlequin ladybird with more than 50,000 records. And also records you take with this app will also go into the Biological Record Center and in the NBN database. Yeah, and this is an example how this app also works for early detection of species where in a non-target approach. So you might know about the City Nature Challenge. This is an annual event organized by iNaturalist, where at the end, the last weekend of April, lots of cities globally and in the UK, not just cities but also regions, go and try to record as many species as possible. And as Coventry University, we contribute and help organizing the event for Coventry and Warwickshire. In the last event this April, there was, for example, so the Tree of Heaven is just starting to spread into Warwickshire and also in Coventry, and there was a new record of the Tree of Heaven in an area in Coventry where we didn't know it was before. And also the other exciting thing, or I mean exciting, maybe negative thing, was the first record of an Australian flatworm, which was detected by someone participating in the project, actually in her garden, which indicates also how important it is to include gardens into these sort of citizen science projects. So in this case, also flatworms are well known to be transported with, to spread by nursery trade. So in pots of plants you buy from nurseries, or also in compost, they can reach gardens. So moving on to the more targeted citizen science for early invasive species. Here I want to focus on the Plant Alert project. So this is a project we have already been running for several years. And so it focuses basically on gardens because this is where the invasion process of most ornamental plants will start. So people buy them, put them in their garden, and if they like the climate and it's suitable for them, they will start spreading there. Also, gardeners are often difficult to access for researchers or for other people who do biological recording. So we think gardeners are actually the best people to know what is spreading in their garden. Also, if a researcher comes to access a garden, you only get like a picture at that point in time, and you don't know how much management maybe the gardener has applied to keep a plant in that place. So that maybe if they wouldn't do that, it would be already spreading all over the place. So that's why gardeners are really a right place to report and observe and let us know what this might become a problem for them. So we launched Plant Alert in 2019, and it followed, before we did a little pilot study. And it's an open-ended long-term project, so we thought it was important to not have any time constraints. Often citizen science projects may run just for a year or two, depending on the funding. But we have been lucky to develop it with the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland, and they have hosted on their webpage, and all their the records are also going into their database. But now, and this is the exciting news, we have just started to expand the project Europe-wide. And because we have basically demonstrated that it is a working mechanism. Now other countries in Europe are also rolling it out to see if it also works in other countries. Yeah, just to show you a few of the results we have received over the years. So you see it's more than 1,000. Yesterday it was 1,063, which is quite nice, of 328 species. So the top species are really well-known invaders. So you might all be familiar with Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, green alkanet. So there's basically no surprise, and you could say, oh, what's the point of a project if we know already these? But then there are the ones which are maybe not that common and also not known very well from outside gardens. Interesting is here in this top list or frequent plant list is, for example, Lysisteria formosa, which is the Himalayan balsam, and we have already recommended this for risk assessment. And it's also spreading outside gardens, and yeah, it's a species which might have impact. So it's yeah, worth to look closer at this species. Yeah, so on the web page, we also have a map where you can see from where records, species have been reported. You can click on these little icons and see what the record was. Gets a bit crowded now. Now we have 1,000 records. So our main contributors are, of course, gardeners, and also because it's a BSBI project, we get lots of BSBI members contributing, which is nice because they have quite a good knowledge also of what to recognize a species. And also we have a few professional gardeners helping, and this is also really useful because they often go to different gardens and really because they are managing the gardens, they notice also which plants are a problem. Yeah, and so how does it actually working? So we found in the pilot study in 2015 there were 8 species reported which have where there were no records in outside gardens in Britain. For 4 of these, and you can see that here on the right, they are known in other countries to have naturalized outside gardens. There's a big database, the GLONAF database, where you can check for every plant if it has naturalized occurrences. And these 4, this is always an indication if a species is already naturalized as a non-native species in another area or country, then it might have the potential also to do that in Britain. But since then, since 2015, when you check 3 of the species here, which didn't have records outside, have already now also records outside gardens. Yeah, one example is Tetrapanax papyrifer, which is so on the map, which I can't see because it's a native to Southeast Asia or China, and it has already invasive or non-native occurrences in Japan, in North America, and South America. And we have also, I mean, I just went in 2015, it didn't, but now it has also started. We find records in London and also in other parts of Britain. And the picture here is, I mean, it gets really big. I mean, I didn't have a picture which was really big. That is why gardeners also call it the T-Rex, because there's a variety called Rex. But in this picture, you can see this is in a National Trust garden. This is like a seedling or like a root runner coming up in a space where it's definitely not planted, which could show you that it has also the potential to quite easily probably to spread out of this garden. And then, yeah, this is just another update we did when we looked at the database. There were 9 species, and when we had the bigger database, which didn't have records outside gardens, and 2 of these we find now have also been recorded outside gardens. I put the number of nurseries here because that is also always like an indication of if a plant is very popular and gets planted by lots of gardeners, the chances that it could escape from gardens is of course also increased. Yeah, just to pick one of these, this is Araugia cericifera, or so-called cruel plant, which is, I think, because the flowers can trap bees or butterflies. And it's a climber, and it's sold in the UK as a tender plant that's not can't survive any frosts. But we got two records from in Plant Alert, and it's also, as you can see here, it's a native from on the map, so it's a native in South America, but has lots of occurrences also globally in other countries. Most of these are more Mediterranean, but we have to see, so if we have indication that it is can also survive winters in Britain, then maybe that's also a plant we should look at more closely in a risk assessment. So I recently talked to someone also from Spain, and they are now really looking at this plant because it's also spreading into citrus plantations and having impacts on farmers there. Yeah, another example is here this Japanese forest grass. So grasses are actually quite popular for gardeners, as are these other plants I mentioned. So like Tetrapanax, there's this trend to have a jungle garden, and this is a favorite plant for jungle gardens, and this one for more grass-based things. So this one, we know it has already naturalized occurrences elsewhere, so it might also be one to look out for. Yeah, a popular group of plants reported are bamboos. And I mean, with bamboos, the biggest problem is the identification. They are very difficult to identify. So that's why you can see like 6 records, people just said bamboo. But then we also have some where people provided a species name, which is of course also very difficult for us to verify. So one example is here the yellow groove bamboo, which was also reported in Plant Alert already, and now this March we get the first record. But I have heard from other people who told me, oh, it's all over the place also already outside gardens. It's just yeah. But this indicates also that it is a problem with bamboo we have in particular about the identification of these species in this group. Yeah, these are just to show you what people said about this plant. So they are actually really annoyed by them, and maybe it's also a warning. So don't plant a bamboo in your garden. I think you can end up with real problems. And I also got sometimes emails from people telling me how terrible it is and that it was worse than Japanese knotweed and things like that. So clearly it's a group where maybe something needs to be done, but then as I said, with the problem of the identification, it is really difficult because even if you then ban one species, it's difficult to ensure that because of the identification, if they are not mixed up with other identities and then still sold. So yeah, now how does Plant Alert actually work? So I haven't explained that up to now. So basically, we ask gardeners to report ornamental plants that are spreading in their garden, but are also difficult to control. Because usually if an ornamental plant in your garden is spreading, most gardeners are actually quite happy about it because you get more plants and it's nice. But then there can come a point for some species that they are suddenly all over your garden and where you don't want them. And it's also difficult to get rid of them. So in my garden, I have Spanish bluebells, and I try for years to get rid of them, and it's just a nightmare. I think everyone who has them will probably agree on that. And there are many others, and these are the ones we would like to get as evidence and to get submitted to Plant Alert. So it's basically a web-based submission system, but it works on a mobile phone and like an app, basically. There's no need to download an app for this. So because often it's just, or you don't need to make an account. It's often just one record you want to make. So we have the version we have run up to now, which I just talked about the results, which is hosted by the BSBI. And so this is also still working, and we will continue with it because it has worked great for the last years and so. But now we have, with the expansion to other countries and to Europe, we had to create a new version. And this one is now linked to iNaturalist. So if you can follow the QR code will take you to this, but also the link is here, and Lucy will put the link also in. So I would encourage you, if to for now maybe to use the unnaturalist version, because of course we have just started it and we are very keen to see how it goes. So the European version, maybe I'll show it here, is connected basically to the iNaturalist platform, but you don't have to have an iNaturalist account. I mean, I would, aside from Plant Alert, I would strongly encourage everyone to have fun because it's just great. But maybe you don't want to, or you are on another app which you prefer. That's all fine. You don't have to. But if you have, then it's nice if you connect. You can connect here to iNaturalist, and then any records you submit through our app will then end up also in your list of iNaturalist records. Our app will send, so you are asked, so you can choose the language. So we have 6 or 5 languages currently, so because it's Europe-wide and we want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. You take a picture which is then sent to PlantNet. PlantNet is another app which uses AI for plant identification, but it doesn't collect the record, so we use it for identification. You get then presented with a list of, or maybe just one species suggested by PlantNet as the right species, and you can agree or disagree with it, and it will also tell you the confidence in this identification. And then we ask you additional questions about the reported plants, which help us to analyze if it might become or has invasive potential. So these are questions like how did it come into your garden? Did you plant it yourself, or did it just appear, or was it there? Did someone give it to you, or was it a plant swap? And then we ask how is it spreading in your garden by seeds, runners, whatever, or has and then how are you dealing with it? Is it possible are you happy with your control efforts to achieve what you would like to achieve? And these sort of things, and this is really, really helpful for us. And we can analyze that and use this evidence also for potential future risk assessments. Yeah, all the results, so when you finish the survey, all the results go into this iNaturalist project, and where you can all go and also see the results. And from there, they will then be used in a Europe-wide in the one-stop alert system. That's how we call it because one-stop is like a big EU Horizon project funded by the EU, where we work with in different countries across Europe. And part of this project is to develop an early alert system for invasive species. And Plant Alert will feed into this alert system, which basically works like that. If something turns up which might be a problem, that then people locally get notified as early as possible, so to be in this prevention zone before something spreads and becomes a big problem, because it's always much, much more effective if you can do something in the beginning. All the records get also submitted, or through iNaturalist, they go into if they reach research grade, they go also into the GBIS Global Biodiversity database. So in iNaturalist, all records you put in there, independent if it's for this project or any other records you take, get usually, so there is a mechanism that people can look at other people's records and can then confirm or disagree with the species identification. And if they agree and 2 people agree on it, then it's a research grade record, and all these go into GBIF. So yeah, what do we do with these data? So far, we have made use of them, and so we have used them to recommend species for risk assessments. They are used in horizon scanning exercises for potential future invasives in Britain. I will tell you a little bit about that next. And we have also used it for updating a list of alternative species. So there's a series of really nice booklets published by the Non-Native Species Secretariat, and they are all either you can get them printed. It's really nice, but they are also all available for download on the web page of the Non-Native Species Secretariat. Yeah, the future potential for the results is that we use them, as I mentioned, in this early alert system, but also the longer we run the project, it might also be interesting. We can use the data for research, for example, to look if species that were not considered fully hardy are now reported more with climate change than they might have been before. Yeah, so just to highlight the GB horizon scanning. So this is a process taking place every few years where the Non-Native Species Secretariat and UKCH organize a workshop where they bring together experts from different species groups, and they all get presented with long lists of species they have to scan through and look for evidence in the published literature and elsewhere. If there's any identification, if they have the potential to become possible, impactful invaders in Britain. And then there are basically three important criteria to look at. The first one is arrival, and then establishment and the potential impact. So in the last exercise in 2025, there was one plant in there, so Ullenbeckia complexa, the wire plant or necklace vine. I will show a picture later, which came into this long list through Plant Alert because it was we had records in there and also comments from people which indicated that this could be a potential problem. And also it was known to be invasive in other countries. So for arrival, this scored really high because it's quite a popular garden plant sold by 22 nurseries. So we use the plant finder basically as an indicator of the number of nurseries of the popularity of a species. Establishment is also very likely because there were already some records in the BSBI database and also from the comments we got from Plant Alert. It has high impacts with a highly competitive woody climber and also is used as a ground cover. So you can easily imagine that it has impacts on other species. And yeah, this species came then is one of the two species that were highlighted as among the 20 identified species were two plants, and one of these is Mullenbeckia. The other one is an aquatic plant, Myriophyllum heterophyllum. And for these species, it's very likely that there will be risk assessments following this identification in the horizon scanning. Yeah, this is just to show you it's a native from New Zealand. It's also there. You can see how it grows. It covers basically whole landscapes, and we have also here at the bottom right. This is a picture from the Isles of Scilly, where it has also showing already a similar habit. And then you can see the comments people made about these plants, and this also indicates that there is something in this plant that could make it an invasive. But of course, we would never just on these comments say a species needs to be banned or is a big problem. So there will always be a risk assessment, which is a proper assessment looking at any other evidence. And yeah, as I explained earlier already. Yeah, this is the current map of records. So there's always the question, is it already established or not? And yeah, we think it is in the process to be established. And you can here also see how records in iNaturalist, and that they are sometimes a bit more advanced maybe or different from what you find in the more official databases, because it is very basically instantaneous. So if people take the record, it will immediately be there. And you can see here that there are also more records further north up to Scotland, which we don't have yet in the BSBI map. Yeah, just another example here on working with gardeners. And this is an example from Wales, where we had a project with the North Wales Wildlife Trust, and they went to 27 gardens and did full inventories of all the plants, and then identified also with Plant Alert the species that are of more concern for Wales. Yeah, and then I think how we are on time. I is still fine. So there we also identified like 4 species for which we then, because that's always the difficult question, are these species, how would they do with climate change? Would it help them or not? And in this case, you can see for these 4 species on the left is always the potential current distribution. So it doesn't mean it is everywhere there, but this is basically under current climate, this species could be in these maps which you see on the left for each species. And on the right side is where they could be if with climate change in 2070. So all of these actually have quite a good potential to become really problematic, which also gives us further indication that we should do something to prevent this maybe. Yeah, and now I'm with the North Wales Wildlife Trust. I also want to highlight their Gardener's Toolkit, which they have recently published and is based on these results. There's a really nice plant profiles for 15 species, which give you some background about these species, how they spread, and also what their potential or what their impacts are, and how you also could manage them. And then also what I really highly recommend are the series of videos. So, I mean, they are really just amazing. It's really worth watching. They are very professional. And I particularly like that they focus also on species which are often not as often looked at. So we always focus on rhododendron and Japanese knotweed and Himalayan balsam. And here they have actually picked the ones out which are the emerging and potential future invasive species. And it's really nicely made. So I really highly recommend them. And they are not long, and it's really, really worth looking at it. Yeah, what else can be done? In the survey, we also asked people if they are happy with the plants, basically. And most of them said so they would have liked if there would have been a label warning them what can happen. And so I think that's also is a valid point, and maybe it's a point which would be interesting also for the nursery industry, because basically it indicates that some of their customers are actually not happy with the products they bought. Because if you buy a plant, an ornamental plant, and it's becoming a problem in your garden, you are not really happy with the product, and maybe you wouldn't have bought it if it would have come with a warning label, or you could have done maybe some preventive actions earlier on when it was in your garden. Yeah, and then just finally, maybe to say the Horticultural Pathway Action Plan, which has been developed with the Non-Native Species Secretariat. It will be published very shortly, I think, early next year or end of this year. And this also includes as an action that there should be a reporting mechanism in place for reporting ornamental plants with invasive behavior, e.g. via plant alert. Yeah, and we have this already in place, this action. We can already tick the box, which is actually nice. So it just needs to be used by people. So please, if you have a garden, just do it. And then, yeah, last but not least, so of course, Be Plant-Wise campaign run mainly by Lucy, I think, from the Non-Native Species Secretariat. And the points here, the main ones are basically not know what you grow, stop the spread, and compost with care. And there's also a link, and when you follow this link, you can also you also get to all the leaflets or the brochures about the gardening without invasive plants, which I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's it. And thank you to everyone who has actually submitted records. This has been amazing and is very, very useful. And I hope you can see that we actually have made quite good use of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katerina. That was a brilliant talk. Plant Alert is really clearly a really great project, and I think it's really a rewarding one as well for anyone that does submit records, because you can obviously see how they're used in really important ways. I think we're due to finish at 2:45, so we've got about 5 minutes for questions. I've seen quite a few come in the chat. So I'll just have a look at these quickly. Yeah, so the first is from Valentine, who says that Plant Finder shows a range of up to 81,000 plants, but then a few slides earlier there was the comparison between non-native and native plants in Britain, where the total number was much lower, so around 2,000.
Yeah.
They asked, yeah.
To clarify that, yeah, sorry. So these are the ones in the Plant Finder are the ones which are sold for gardens. So they are not all outside, not yet. And the ones these 2,000 are the ones which have been recorded outside gardens. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Ruth asked, does Plant Alert include the results from INSMAPper? So yeah, she's from a local rivers trust, and they record sightings through that. Yeah, do you want to explain the difference?
No, so INSMAPper is mainly to record, it's not focused on gardens. So Plant Alert is entirely focused on people's gardens, and so far I understand InsMapper is just outside. You map what you find along rivers, and yeah.
Yeah.
So you can use both. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Sarah asks if there's a chance that any captive records of garden plants would get mixed up with wild records in GBIF and other places that iNaturalist feeds into, like iRecord.
Yeah, so there is a mechanism in iNaturalist to put plants as captive or cultivated, and we are going to do that. But then also the additional questions we ask in the survey will help us to decide if a plant is actually still considered captive, or if it's spreading, like if it's like spreading by seeds, for example, and people say, oh yeah, then it's more likely also to be able to spread outside. And I mean, also to say in iNaturalist, there are lots of records of species that are not, where you pretty obvious can see that people haven't ticked this box. So, and I know it's a problem because it's not on the app. So you have to go in your online version and then you can only say it's cultivated. Or people who confirm the records can do it. But just to say, in the context of the one-stop project, we will anyway look at all the records we receive, even if they are still labeled as captive. And yeah, so it's not that, of course, in GBIF, only the ones that are not captive will go into there. But for one-stop and the alert system, we look into all of them.
Yep. So Ben says they've seen a dramatic rise in oilseed rate along their river and a sharp decline in the Himalayan balsam. Guessing whether, is oilseed rape viewed as non-native or invasive?
I mean, it's definitely not an ornamental garden plant, so it wouldn't be in the scope of Plant Alert. I think so. There is a native. I mean, it's one of these. I don't know if it's native or not. So I have to admit that I know that there is a native brassica on the coast, but that's Brassica oleracea. So I don't know if that's Brassica rapa. I think is. I'm not sure. So I don't, maybe not. But I also noticed actually that it is spreading more now.
Just have a quick look in the Q&A. So this, you might not be able to answer this one. This is Agos who's based in the Broads in East Anglia. So they're experiencing a problem with the increased growth of Alexanders, which are causing problems. So they understand that other areas have increased the frequency of grass cutting, but that hasn't worked. So I think they're asking if you're aware of any alternative approach they could take.
I'm aware of the species because I know also in Wales is spreading everywhere along the roadsides, but I'm not sure what's the why and what's the best way to control it. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I think that is all of the questions. So yeah, just say thank you again, Katerina, for such a brilliant talk and for all your time today. And thank you everyone for joining.
Yep. Thank you. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone.
Yep. Yes. Bye bye. Thanks.